Hi, I'm Pat Ham, and I use Reason to produce rock music. Today I'd like to demonstrate two things that I do with every Reason project that I work on. First, let's have a look at our project. We have an empty rack, and I've added a Kong drum designer so that we could get some signal to work with. I've routed the kick and the snare out to their own individual mixer channels, and I set up some quick sequencer material. This is what it sounds like. Now, the first thing that I do with every Reason project has to do with my send effects. I'll start with an RV7000 reverb and drag it directly below the master section. If I press Tab to flip the rack, I can see how the routing happens automatically in Reason. And it works as you would expect. Effects send out into the audio input on the effect, and then audio output from the effect back to effects return. Pretty logical. This is exactly what we would expect for our send effects. But I actually don't like this because it doesn't give me so much control over the effect. When I'm working with effects, particularly a reverb, I like to roll off the low end using a high-pass filter so that I don't apply reverb to all that low-end material, which will muddy up my mix. So the first thing that I do with every new Reason project is add my send effects into their own mixer channels. And this is how it works. I'll click Add Device and select Create Mix Channel. And let's name this FX1 Reverb. Let's show our insert effects and drag our RV7000 into the mix channel's insert effects bay. So if I flip the rack again, you'll notice that the routing has not changed yet. So this is still behaving in the default manner. So before we change this, let's go over to our mixer really quickly and just apply some of that reverb to our kick and snare. Now let's listen to our clip again. So now we can hear the reverb. Let's jump back to the rack by clicking on F6 and repatch so that we are using the mix channel for our send effect. So here's how we repatch. The effect send 1 should go to the input on the mix channel. Let's pull the audio output out for now, and then I will patch this into the insert effects for the mix channel. So to device goes to audio in on the RV7000. Audio out goes to the from, just as we would with a standard insert effect. And then we get back to our master section by using the direct out, which we patch to our effects return. Now if we listen to the sequencer material again, nothing has changed. It sounds exactly the same as it originally did. But now let's have a look at our mixer again. And now that I am routing this effect through its own mix channel, I'm now able to take advantage of everything that a mix channel offers me. So for example, I can add compression to it. I can gate my reverb. I can add a high and low pass filter to my reverb, or I can EQ it. Anything I can do using a mix channel, I can now apply to the reverb. So I mentioned that I like to put a high pass filter on, so let's do that. Let's start with that. Now I realize that that's fairly aggressive, but of course I want you to be able to hear the effect. And as you can hear, there's no effect going to the low end. When I disengage it, It's this thick, rumbly reverb that's happening on the low end. Now in this scenario, we're dealing with a kick and snare, so it's probably not such a big deal. But you can imagine that once you get a full mix with all your instruments, with your drum sets, your guitars, your bass, you're not going to want to add reverb to the low end because it's going to muddy your mix up. So there's an example of using one of the standard mixed channel features, the high-pass filter. So let's repeat this process. Let me jump back over to the rack. This time I will start with a mixed channel. So add device, create mixed channel. This time we'll make a delay. I'm going to call this FX2 delay. And I'm just going to use the good old DDL1 digital delay line. Now, as you can see, since I dragged it into my mix channel, it routed properly. But I still need to go in here and manually route my effects send 2 to the input of this mix channel, and then the direct out of the mix channel back to effects return to. And now I have a delay. Now, let me turn the feedback all the way down. I just want to hear one delay. Let's apply that delay to our snare. You can hear that there's one delay happening to our snare. And once again, if I want to, I can add a high-pass filter to it. But that's only the beginning of what we can do by using a mix channel for our send effects. And this is where things start to get interesting, because another thing that I can do is I can add send effects to my send effects. For example, if I'm dealing with my delay, what if I want to put a reverb on my delay? Click on 1 to activate the reverb. And now every time we hear the delay off of the snare, that delay signal will also have a reverb on it. So let's hear what it sounds like. I've added the reverb to the delay channel. So we're not hearing any reverb on the initial snare hit. We're only hearing the reverb on the delayed signal. Now you may have wondered why I turned the feedback all the way down on the DDL1. The reason is because of the next thing that we want to try, since we're messing around with effects using mixed channels. And that is, what if I want to apply delay to the same channel? So if I click this, number 2, I will be applying delay to the delay line. Now before I do this, a word of warning. This is the kind of thing that if you are not careful, you can really hurt your ears or you can damage your equipment. For example, if I am boosting my delay signal using the EQ, what's going to happen is if I turn the delay on my delay channel, every single time the delay gets triggered, the boost will happen again. So if I'm boosting a high frequency and it keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating, it's going to get higher and higher and higher. If you're not careful, you can really destroy your speakers. So be very careful with this. So this is how I do it. First of all, I don't generally boost when I'm doing this trick. Usually this is the kind of thing where I want to use this trick to create kind of a lo-fi delay effect. And if I'm applying delay and I'm cutting high or low material, then every single time the delay gets triggered, it will get lower and lower and lower. And it will give it kind of a lo-fi kind of aesthetic. So let's hear what I'm talking about. But again, being very careful. When I do this, the first thing I do is pull this level down really low. The other thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing this is keep your speaker volume very low and have your hand near the volume knob because you might need to pull it down really fast. Again, be careful with this trick. This can destroy your speakers if you take it too far. Now I have my delay line. I have the level all the way down. Let's click on the 2, and we should start to hear the delay repeating more. Let me turn my reverb off so we're just hearing the delay. So even though I have a feedback set all the way down, which means that I should only have one delay signal, just one repeat of the delay, since I am sending delay to the delay, it is repeating over and over again because it keeps getting sent in an endless loop to that delay. And if you listen closely, every time the delay hits, it gets a little bit thinner because it's every single time it is getting a high pass filter applied to it. Remember, keep your volume low. Now let me put a low pass filter on it too. This was where the kind of lo-fi effect is really going to come in. So every single time that delay is repeating, it's getting a low pass and a high pass applied to it, and it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Now you can of course achieve this kind of effect using an effect like the echo, but this is just another way that you can do it, and this is another technique that you might find interesting. Now let's add some reverb to it. So that's just an example of things that you can do by sending an effects send using a mix channel instead of using the standard effects send routing. So that's the first thing I do with every new Reason project because it allows me to have a lot more flexibility over my effects sends. The second thing that I do with every new Reason project is much simpler, but it's also related to thing number 1. Now we're back at the rack. If I press tab to look at the back of the rack, notice the routing coming out of the master section. Master out is going to 1 and 2, which is left and right out of my audio interface. I'm simply going to change that routing. So instead of master out, it goes through the control room out. Now, why do I do that? Press F5 to go back to our mixer. And down here in the mixer, you'll notice there are 2 outputs in Reason. There's the master level fader, and there is the control room out. Now, the master level fader is something that I never touch. I set it and forget it. Once it's at a level where I'm happy, I don't want it to move at all. One exception to that is when I am fading. I would automate a fade in or automate a fade out if a song calls for it. But other than that, I never touch my master fader. The control room out, on the other hand, well, that I move all the time. I'm using this control now to change the volume that I'm hearing out of my speakers so that I can pull this level down as far as I want. And if we listen to our signal, it's very quiet coming out of the speakers, but if you'll notice, looking at our meters, it's not changing our mix in any way. All it's doing is changing the volume that's coming out of our speakers. This way, it's very easy for me to pull my volume down and mix at a very quiet, comfortable level without having any impact on the mix that I'm working on. That's the number one reason why I do this, so that I can easily turn up and down my speakers without having any impact on the mix. Even though that's the case, don't forget about the level of the master level fader. Sure, it has no effect on my mix, but it does have an effect on the signal going out of Reason, which means if I'm working on a song and I export song as audio file or export loop as audio file, they will be very quiet if I have my control room out turned down like this. So always remember when you are exporting a song to return that control room output level back to 0. So that's the main reason I use this, is so that I can easily regulate the volume of my speakers and I'm not having any impact on the mix. But there's another reason that I use the control room out, and that is this part right here. If I click on Master here, I can now select from a source to send to the control room output. So what this means is I can hear what is being sent to my send effects, or I can hear what's being returned from my send effects. This way I can solo my effects and make mixing decisions based on a soloed signal. So for example, I have some signal being sent to my delay. If I would like to hear only the delay, I can click on Return To. And there's our delay. If we add some reverb, Return 1 we can hear now. What's also useful is that we can hear what we are sending to send to. And as you can see, in this case, we're listening to a delayed signal because we are sending effect 2 to effect 2. So this is a little bit weird, isn't it? But what are we sending to send 1? That should just be the kick. We can hear how loud it is. We can make it louder, quieter. We can hear exactly what's being sent to effect send 1. Now I added a little bit of snare there. Once we're done with all these changes, click back to Master, and we're back to our main mix. So there you have it. Those are the two things that I do with every Reason project that I work on. Once again, thing 1 is I use mix channels for all of my send effects. Thing 2 is that I change my output routing from master out to control room out so that I can control the level that I'm mixing at without affecting the mix, and so that I have control over what my source is for that control room out signal. Once again, I can't stress this enough. If you are using mix channels and you send a signal to itself, make sure that you are careful. You can hurt your speakers, you can damage your hearing, you can do a lot of bad stuff with this. So please be careful with this. I hope you found that interesting. Please let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts about this, if this is something that you do in your mixes, or if you'd like to see me demonstrate anything else, or if you have any questions. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you soon.